Good afternoon, members of the media, wider viewing and listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome to this week's post-cabinet media briefing. I have come here today to address one of the decisions taken by cabinet today. If you would allow me to start by outlining the role of the Attorney General. The tradition of the role of Attorney General is that the Attorney General is a guardian of the public's interest. So traditionally, out of the Westminster system, which we adopted, the Attorney General is recognized as the guardian of the public interest. Trinidad, as you know, has a written constitution, and in the written constitution, our cabinet is comprised of the Prime Minister and the Attorney General, those two specific positions outlining the importance of the office of the Attorney General. In addition to that, if anyone sues the state or wants to sue the state in any civil action, the suit is formed against the state in the Attorney General. The Attorney General is named as the body, the person to be sued when you're suing the state. I do this to just outline the importance of the office of the Attorney General. Additionally, as you would have seen when you look at other jurisdictions with Attorney Generals, you will always notice that the Attorney General is the main advisor to a cabinet, or the Attorney General is the person in many instances that gives directions as to how lawsuits, etc., should be pursued. I'm outlining all of this to get to the point that one of the decisions taken by cabinet today was with respect to the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau. You would have recognized, for example, in the United States, one of the roles of an Attorney General in the United States is to give direction with respect to certain investigations, and sometimes investigations that have lead to criminal charges. So, for example, as you would have seen currently taking place in the United States, was the Attorney General, or one of the recent Attorney Generals, Miss Loretta Lynch. When she was the Attorney General, she drove and she was the spokesperson after the United States prosecutorial arms decided to charge persons in the whole international FIFA world scandal, the global scandal surrounding FIFA. And it was the Attorney General of the United States who came and informed the public of months and months of investigation, and these were the charges that were going to be laid. Again, right now, the whole Mueller investigation taking place in the United States, the overseeing body for that is the Attorney General's office. And in particular, when Attorney Generals may have recused themselves, you see coming down the line, the next in line in the office of the Attorney General. In 2002, the then cabinet took a decision to establish a corruption investigation bureau in the Ministry of the Attorney General to deal in a holistic manner with the question of corruption, particularly in the public sector. That was officially done in 2002. But if my memory serves me correctly, even before then, the then Attorney General, Mr. Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj, which would have been prior to 2000, had formed what had become known as an Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau, and he was working along with them to investigate certain allegations of public corruption, etc. In any event, the cabinet record shows that in 2002, an administration, a PNM administration, took a decision to formally put the Corruption Investigation Bureau under the office of the Attorney General. And I can tell you that that Corruption Investigation Bureau is to coordinate and conduct investigations into infractions of established procurement procedures and into corrupt practices. The Bureau is to report the results of such inquiries to the Commissioner of Police and the Director of Public Prosecutions. So from the outset, it was very carefully aligned and created with a policy that any outcomes of what the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau did would be directed to the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Commissioner of Police, and that the Bureau would be provided with all of the resources required to carry out its mandate, including personnel with special expertise, legal advice, staff, and accommodations. And traditionally, that is where the Office of the Attorney General came in from an administration point of view, and ensuring that the ACIB, the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau, is properly resourced to be able to carry out its mandate. This resourcing would have included forensic accountants, specific investigators, and even legal advisors for the investigation of matters of corruption, in particular when it came to certain corrupt practices in the public sector, and that the Bureau would keep the Attorney General informed of the findings of its investigation. That is very different to providing the results of their inquiries to the Commissioner of Police and the Director of Public Prosecutions. And that, of course, all makes sense, falling in line with how I've just outlined the traditional rule and, in fact, our constitutional rule of the Attorney General in Trinidad and Tobago. Furthermore, this was actually established, so here it is, in 2000 by the Ministry of National Security to investigate serious allegations into the Piarco Airport, Incogen, and the desalination plants projects. So in 2000, it was formulated under the Ministry of National Security, and that is where my recollection of then Attorney General Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj had commenced investigations into Piarco Airport, Incogen, and desalination plant projects, which you all would recall there were serious allegations of corruption into those 3 specific projects. And at the end of the day, it actually led to the collapse of the UNC government at the time, when Mr. Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj and 2 other members of the UNC left and crossed the floor and formed themselves as independents. It was as a result of these corruption investigations. So it was then formalized under the Office of the Attorney General in 2002. Unfortunately, and this continued from 2002 until today's date, we have seen, unfortunately, over the period of time, the abuse on occasion by an Attorney General of issues and the utilization of the ACIB. You would have recalled between the years of 2010 and 2015, there were allegations that the then Attorney General abused his office. In particular, there was the obtaining of a file in relation to a Miss Anna Dionorine, if I remember correctly, and the procurement of a Range Rover. And what was held up on a political platform was a Trinidad and Tobago Police Service file. And at that time, the question had been raised, how was this obtained? And it was obtained by the Attorney General, and there were allegations that the Attorney General had put pressure on the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and in particular the ACIB that fell under his office. And at that time, there was a lot of tension. Thankfully, and not surprisingly, from 2015 to now, there have been no such allegations. The Office of the Attorney General has allowed the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau to carry out its work unencumbered. It's provided it with support, provided it with resources, and just basically allowed the ACIB to continue to do its work. Within recent times, a public conversation has arisen as to whether the right place for the ACIB to reside is within the Office of the Attorney General, or whether it should revert back to the full autonomy of the Commissioner of Police and the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Of course, the ACIB officers are Trinidad and Tobago Police Service officers, TTPS officers. There are a number of investigations that have been taking place, as you all know, and one of the reasons this was set up in this way was that the Attorney General's office could help and assist and maybe drive the resources for the successful conclusion of allegations into corrupt practices in public office. This administration is not prepared and took a decision today to allow that public conversation, to allow any cloud to take place over anything that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service may be doing and the investigations they may be conducting into corruption, into public officers, persons who held public office, and into any misbehavior in public office allegations that are currently being investigated or that are to be investigated in the future. As a result of that, today the Cabinet has taken a decision to transfer the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau transfer the autonomy and the running of it and the full administration of it to the Commissioner of Police, thereby taking it completely out of the Office of the Attorney General. The sole reason for doing this is that we do not want to allow, and we're seeing on the horizon, persons utilizing this nefarious, this nebulous argument really, that there's been political interference into a process. As the Attorney General is on public record as saying, he does not interact with the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau. He's not done so, and therefore to avoid, amongst other things, developing conversation, or to avoid persons who may be under investigation trying to sell a story that there's political interference into the investigation of allegations against corruption into their behavior whilst they were in public office, the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago has today decided, and we've approved and confirmed, that the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau should fall completely under the control of the Commissioner of Police. You have heard, and I now put on my hat as the Minister of National Security, you've heard the Commissioner of Police say that he had made a recommendation to me as the Minister of National Security that he form, amongst other recommendations, he forms a financial intelligence investigation division that would have the fraud squad, the ACIB, the cybercrime unit, and other specific units of the police service, the FIB, etc., under one roof. That is something I've told the Commissioner of Police as Minister of National Security I approve of, and expect to bring some other recommendations that he's proposed. I've given him some further policy recommendations as to the restructuring of the org chart and org structure of the police service that are currently being done, and then that will come to Cabinet. One of the consequences of this decision today of the Cabinet that I'd like to put the country on notice of is that it means 100% now that the drive, the effort, the pursuit of corruption investigations and the resourcing of corruption investigations will reside completely in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Because another conversation you've heard is, well, why hasn't the government done anything about bringing criminal charges with respect to corruption matters? This was one of the only methods that the government had of resourcing investigations, particular to corruption investigations into public officials or acts carried out in the public sector. When this is now transferred exclusively to the control of the Commissioner of Police and the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, there is absolutely no nexus, no locus standi, etc. of the government in these investigations, even from the resourcing point of view. Of course, the Commissioner of Police, who constitutionally is in charge of his own budget and how his money is spent, etc., will presumably ensure that in his budgetary request there's specific money for the resourcing of these outfits, etc. So it means now that the drive of investigations, in particular the pursuit of investigations, the laying of charges, fully lies with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And they cannot even be in the spectre, the creation of a complaint, the creation of a narrative, the creation of any false argument that there's any political interference into the investigations that these units in the police service will be carrying out. So that was the decision of the Cabinet today, that the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau will now be fully transferred from the Office of the Attorney General to the Commissioner of Police, and he will now be in charge 100% of the administration of the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau, and the police service going forward will be 100% responsible, without any government involvement, into the investigation and the pursuit of investigation, the resourcing of investigation, the amount of effort put into investigations of allegations with respect to public officials and corrupt acts carried out by public officials, in particular former public officials who may have held office. Thank you very much. I'll take questions at this stage. Mr. Wilson.
What was the budget for the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau? Secondly, what's the time frame for the implementation of this policy?
To answer the second question, first is immediate. The Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau already has its own premises. It already operates in its own office, so it was never part of the administrative or the office side of the Office of the Attorney General. So all of that is fairly simple, and I mean right now it's just the pieces are picked up from the financing side by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. I am sure that arrangements can be made for funds to be provided in the midterm review if there are not sufficient funds, and for funds that may not have been spent from the Office of the Attorney General to be so transferred. So from an implementation point of view, there should be a seamless transition, and from my point of view it can happen immediately. With respect to the amount of money, I cannot remember. I don't know why the figure of 30 million is in my mind, but that's trying to recall from the budget documents, which were in October of last year, how much it is. But the budget documents would have a line item under the Office of the Attorney General for the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau. I don't know why the amount of, 54, I was going to say 53, 54 officers.
Some people may take the cynical point of view that the government is transferring this thing quite late in the day when many of the allegations may have already been investigated and information and evidence may be obtained, and therefore is just sort of preparing for what may be said in any court matters that are imminent or not imminent down the road. And it doesn't change the fact that maybe a lot of the investigation took place under the Attorney General's jurisdiction.
Okay, so let me clarify that. The investigations that would have taken place are investigations carried out by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and whatever resources they may bring into. So, for example, in the Piarco matter, you all would have recalled that the police service at that time, the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau, would have used forensic investigators. One of them, the name stands out, and persons in Trinidad aware, Bob Lindquist. At the time those investigations were carried out, charges were laid, and they've proceeded. As the Attorney General under our administration has said, he has played no part in any, and I put that on the record, and he said he didn't even know who was or had never met the head of the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau under this administration, and within recent times, I believe it's Mr. Nurse. So I can't help. There's nothing I can do to deal with cynicism apart from lay the facts, the very clear facts. There's been no interference, etc. This now arose as a public conversation. It arose by the Director of Public Prosecutions, who is an office holder, a constitutional office holder that this administration takes on very seriously. So from the time the Director of Public Prosecutions, who, as you know, under Section 90 of the Constitution, is in charge of criminal matters in Trinidad and Tobago, and is the only person who has the constitutional power not to start criminal charges, because police can lay charges, but to discontinue criminal proceedings. As soon as the DPP raised the issue, we as an administration immediately discussed it and took a decision. If the DPP feels that way, let us just transfer it out. And that was the reason why it was transferred out.
Now, this doesn't affect the Attorney General's capacity to bring civil action on the basis of...
Absolutely not. So as you all are aware, and when I wore a different hat, I'd done a number of press conferences on that just to inform the public. Out of the Office of the Attorney General, again, they were resourced, certain investigations took place. The Attorney General's office can only bring civil actions involving serious allegations and acts of corruption were commenced, have been going through the courts of Trinidad and Tobago, and will continue to be pursued by the Office of the Attorney General and EMBD on one hand, HDC on another.
That the information upon which the civil action is based will come from the same anti-corruption?
No, it absolutely, those civil actions did not, the police had absolutely nothing to do with that whatsoever. In fact, I'm on record as saying that we had international best-in-class forensic auditors, investigators, international attorneys who've done this successfully before, for example, in Turks and Caicos, and had built out an international team on the civil side. So no, there is absolutely no involvement of the police there whatsoever. Yes.
Was there any point before this decision was made where the cabinet had any concern that that particular unit should have been removed from the AG's office, or is it only up until this moment here?
Absolutely did not come up in conversation at all, because there is no, the Attorney General wasn't involved. He wasn't involved in the day-to-day running or any reporting to him or anything like that. So it's quite simply, quite honestly, it was not on the radar. The Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau just continued with its work, pursuing its work, I assume, as it is mandated to do, and there was no interaction taking place there whatsoever. So it is when the, as I said, the DPP raised it and it started to become a public conversation, and then knowing to a certain extent that persons may want to make more noise about it. It's quite simple. Look, just remove something that can become a noise topic. There's no need for it, and put it elsewhere.
For those who may not understand some of this legal language as a rule, what happens to anything that would have been done under the AG's office by the Bureau? It just transfers automatically to the police?
Okay, so let me see. Everything done by the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau is done by the police, and the police assigned. Those 54 officers assigned to the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau. The Attorney General's office, the Office of the Attorney General, the Attorney General in particular, have nothing to do with the work that they're carrying out. They're doing police work. So their investigations, their gathering of evidence, their decisions to lay charges, etc., have nothing to do with the Office of the Attorney General. So that's why, in answer to Mr. Wilson, I can say it should be a seamless transaction and a transition in that move to the Commissioner of Police. So I don't know what they're doing, but anything that they were doing, they just continue doing. But now, the administrative side, so the payment of bills for rental of the building, the procurement of pencils and paper and printers and that type of thing, will now be the responsibility of the Office of the Commissioner of Police.
The issue of what they're doing, do you have any idea of the track record of the Anti-Corruption Bureau in bringing cases against corrupt people in this country?
The Piarco Airport inquiry, I guess, is the most infamous, but you said bringing cases. So I guess they were the ones who did the investigation, laid the charges there. They have had certain cases over the years, certainly under our administration. I cannot tell you of any large corruption investigation case that they've laid and they've laid the charges, etc. So no, I don't have that information. But they would have done things. I remember seeing that certain charges have been laid, and when you read the newspaper, you would see it's by the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau. But I can't think of any. I certainly don't have the statistics of how many charges they've laid, but I'm sure they've laid charges over the period of time.
What about more generally about the fight against white-collar crime? Are you, as a representative of the government, satisfied about the capacity of various arms of the government to fight white-collar crime?
Various arms of the government. Well, as I've just outlined, the only people who can charge, so in the criminal arena, that's up to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and the DPP. So those are not arms of the government. So there's nothing that we can do as a government, as we understand, as a layperson understands our government, the cabinet, the various ministers or ministries. There's nothing we can do there to fight, to lay criminal charges with respect to white-collar crime. But I can tell you, as an administration, we have focused on it. For example, you will have heard, in addition to the EMBD matters, the HDC Eden Garden matters, another one was the East Port of Spain Development Company, where an employee was found and $18 million of money that he allegedly misappropriated and stole from the East Port of Spain Development Company were frozen. Again, that was handled by us when I was there in the Office of the Attorney General to ensure that proper attorneys were there, froze the accounts, pursuing the accounts civilly, and then pass it over to the police. So what we can do, for example, after the flooding last year, and there were allegations with respect to acts of fraud committed at the Ministry of Social Development, we ask the police to please come in, and what we can do is we can assist the police and make sure that files don't go missing, documents don't go missing, public servants who should assist the police in questioning, etc. That was done. Personally, I think white-collar crime is an issue in Trinidad and Tobago, and as an administration, I know for a fact that we have been doing what we can to push it, and that's why we've had to pursue these civil actions, etc. And from my perspective, to make an example that is unacceptable in society. In my discussions now as Minister of National Security with the Commissioner of Police, from a policy perspective, I have told him, it's my respectful suggestion and a forceful suggestion at that, that they have to go after white collar crime in Trinidad and Tobago. I've stood, including I believe this week, and concluded another press conference by saying, in my view, no one is above the law from the top to the bottom, and as a society, we have to fight the scourges of corruption, and that includes white collar corruption.
The DPP has been slow conversation that is also taking place, that there is a reticence on his part to take matters to that point of name charges, and that these investigations just go on and on and on and on.
Kiko, for example.
Okay.
Right.
Good tag team here by OCM. Yes. So what I can tell you is I don't want to overstep any boundary. So the Constitution has made it very clear that the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions is ring-fenced by the Constitution, and it would be wrong for any politician to put any pressure, etc. So I'm not going to specifically comment on that. In conversations with the Director of Public Prosecutions in the past, because he's someone I know from practice, etc., he does not conduct investigations. So he always says, look, the Director of Public Prosecutions does not have the power or the resources to conduct investigations. So it's similar like the United States. You have the AG's office, but then you'll have the law enforcement, be it the FBI or the police, and they're working together. So I can tell you, again, as the Ministry of National Security, my weekly meetings, when we're talking about certain operations, I tell them from the moment we're starting, please bring in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. The same thing happens in the United Kingdom with the Crown Prosecution Service. I am a strong believer that rather than police conduct investigations, go down the road and then bringing the Director of no, let us at the start both be on the same page so the lawyers can guide the police as to how to investigate. That has to be the most efficient way to do it. So I'm not going to comment on that. Yes, the CLICO matter, we're now 2019, the intervention was, if I remember correctly, January 2009. That's 10 years. The Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions only got involved, from my recollection, I think in 2012 or 2013, when a decision was taken that he should commence an investigation. He started to resource it. So let's say 2012 to now, that's still a 7-year period. We had a commission of inquiry, the Coleman Commission of Inquiry. The Prime Minister, upon receipt of it, did not lay it to Parliament, did not make it public, passed it over to the Director of Public Prosecutions. I know that they're working, because when I was in the Ministry of the Attorney General, and we had to fund, because the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, again, is an office that falls under the Attorney General's office from an administration point of view and a financing point of view. Bills were being paid to the forensic auditors, etc., etc. As a citizen, would I like these matters to be concluded a lot quicker than they are being? Absolutely. But I am not going to lay any criticism on anyone. I would just like persons to do their job as efficiently and properly as possible, and let's get to the conclusion.
Challenge, Minister, just as you had outlined, that the AG's, that the DPP's office, just like the judiciary, the issue of independence on one level, but it has to submit its request for financing through the Attorney General, as opposed to being able to have that done on its own. Is that something the government is looking at?
For the Office of the Director, no, that has not come up as a conversation at all. Let me say this, there is no government department, no part of the whole government that is going to say that we have sufficient resources. In national security, I'm constantly pushing, fighting. We have limited finances in the country. How do you prioritize the spend? The difficulties in financial difficulties in deciding how to spend money. You always think you could be better resourced. You have the prison saying they need more. You have the police service saying they need more. The lifeguards saying they need more. Immigration, fire service, etc. So it's very difficult, but it's a constant prioritization. My philosophy is, we know what we have, utilize it to the best possible way, and make sure we get value for money for the taxpayers in doing that, and let's just push hard. We have to go over and beyond, especially in these current circumstances that we face, and just do the best that we can.
If the Bureau under the police needs to do an international order or to search somebody's account internationally, there is an office in the Attorney General's office that deals with that those issues. How would that work?
That actually goes on across the world. That's how it's done. It's my mutual legal treaty assistance, right? MLATs requests that are made, and the way it is done is through the Office of the Attorney General in Trinidad. That is the where it has been positioned in law. So the police would make the request. Now those are specific public officers who would, that information would come to, and in a very confidential manner they would send it off to the various jurisdictions. I can tell you, for example, in my trips to Washington, and in Washington meeting with law enforcement and also meeting with the State Department and also the Department of Justice, and at the Department of Justice again is public officers. So if they want to request, if the FBI is doing an investigation, they want to request information from Trinidad, they have to go through the Department of Justice. The FBI is actually a part of the Department of Justice. They would make the request to the Office of the Attorney General. Office of Attorney General will then set about gathering that information and sending it back. This has been the international way of setting up investigations and international investigations that go beyond your jurisdiction. So there's absolutely nothing to fear there. I don't see, again, any break in transition or any seamlessness in how they operate. It's been that way for years, and internationally that's how everyone operates. The same thing in the United Kingdom. When the National Crime Agency are doing their investigations, they want information, they send it through the same route.
Speak of the transfer of the bureau to the Police Commissioner's office, I'm wondering if you would want to weigh in on an issue, a subject of conversation concerning fatigues being worn by the Commissioner, and whether or not this flouts rules or regulations, but also whether this in any way should have anyone concerned about the militarization of the police.
I was actually quite disappointed to see that escalated into a conversation. I wouldn't say a national level conversation, but it certainly escalated. And I think it was driven or initiated by, what's his name? Right, and he has some organization, a one-man organization. So when I see that type of thing and seeing that a one-man soapbox organization is allowed to escalate something like this, I think the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service are doing a fantastic job under the Commissioner of Police. I give them my full support once they're acting within the parameters of the law. My recollection when I saw this conversation arise is we used to have SWAT used the same type of uniforms, and certainly when you look at international news, you see that the special operation type operators in the police service, SWAT, the specialized elite units, they have to equip themselves a certain way. So I can say without a fear of contradiction, there is no militarization of the police service going on. There is absolutely none of that. You look at their equipment, it is the same equipment that guard an emergency, the MOPS operators, which is one of the most elite units in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and the public won't be exposed to them because they're only utilized in special operations. They carry the same type of equipment, the way they're dressed, and this type of thing. So I see absolutely no problem with it whatsoever.
Was your permission sought? Because one of the things they said is that...
I saw that conversation taking place this morning, so I will say frontly and if there is that requirement in the law for gazetting, no, that did not take place under me. The Commissioner of Police did discuss with me upon his coming into office the utilization of certain specialist uniforms, and I gave him the full concurrence and the stamp of approval. Go ahead, let's just get the job done. And I see absolutely nothing wrong with how it is being done.
Getting the job done. We saw some high-profile detentions, but then subsequent releases in the case of 2 persons alleged to be involved in certain types of activity, habeas corpus motions, and so on. Are you concerned that while the police may be moving very aggressively, in the one hand in terms of arrests and detentions, on the side of conviction and prosecution, there may be some flaw or weakness there?
No. as I had indicated previously, and that's specifically within the mandate and the remit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Sometimes in operations, you do things that are disruptive. So you may have certain intelligence, and you know that intelligence is good intelligence. You have to go in and be disruptive. There's a difference between intelligence and evidence. You need evidence to be able to charge, and they may not have reached that stage, but certainly in the disruption factor, it also allows an opportunity to garner and extract information that you may not have gotten otherwise. Once the police service do things within the ambit of the law, so for example, I saw it being suggested, I can't remember where, might be the same soapbox, that were search warrants obtained, or did persons? The answer is yes, search warrants were obtained. So in the discussion with the police from a policy point of view beforehand, I made it a point to say, make sure and get your search warrants for your various searches, etc. And that's what they did. So once things are done properly and within the law, you're not always going to be able to convict. You're not always going to be able to charge. But there are many operations that once they're intelligence driven, and I would say 90% of our operations now are being intelligence driven. They're good outcomes if you disrupt something that could have taken place, etc.
The country now has specific gang legislation which allows, as I understand it, the police to go in and arrest people they believe to be gang leaders. Arrest and charge people they believe to be gang leaders. If that's the case, and if, according to the last Sunday Express, there are 2,500 gang members in this country, what's the problem with the police arresting and charging so-called gang leaders?
To be able to charge, you have to have evidence. So what that specific legislation, and I'm on record and I'll repeat it again here as you've given me the opportunity, the anti-gang legislation has been utilized. So within recent times, the police have charged, they've charged not only gang leaders, but also gang members, and also persons who are assisting gang members for harboring, also threatening persons who wanted to give information on gangs, persons who wanted to get out of the gangs. Those are specific charges and express charges under this legislation that exists now, and those are being utilized and they have been utilized. With respect to the charging of persons who it's alleged are gang leaders, again, once the police have sufficient evidence to lay that charge, I am certain that they will lay the charge. That gang legislation, the anti-gang legislation, also provides, for example, for detention orders. So again, suggesting to the police, you know you're going to face habeas corpus applications within a specific period of time. If you have sufficient evidence to go to court under the anti-gang legislation, and by the way, the Anti-Terrorism Act has it as well, and you can apply for detention orders where the court can give you up to 14 days to hold persons. Very often, and you see it, for example, happening in the United Kingdom when they go in and they disrupt terrorist cells, etc. They go and they get these detention orders to hold persons longer because you've disrupted, you have them in custody now, but the investigation doesn't stop. So it's ongoing, and you want to hold them in custody so they don't destroy evidence, they don't contact people, etc. The same applies for anti-gang legislation. I'm hoping that the police will start utilizing it more. They have actually utilized it in the areas where they've successfully charged people. So I know they brought people in while they were holding him. They went for the first time for detention orders. The court granted it and they were able to do their work. So I hope that the police service going forward would utilize it more. And as you say, the legislation is very specific. To be a member of the gang, or the definition of a gang is more than two people who are acting in concert to create criminal activity. I mean, not word for word, but that is the general ambit of the law. Utilize the law. Utilize the law as well, for example, in human trafficking. So whereas you mightn't be able to say, okay, these persons, you have the evidence of them human trafficking. You know they were acting in concert, more than two of them, doing illegal acts, etc. Charge them for being in a gang and these types of things. So I hope that they will utilize it more going forward. I know they have, and they are now looking at those suggestions.
Do you have any idea why they did not utilize the detention orders in last week's detentions? last week's arrests?
I think, it's new, and I think they just need to step out the box and pursue it. But at the end of the day, those are police decisions. So I don't know the specifics as to why they did or didn't do it. I rarely hear about it afterwards when reports are being given.
On the issue of human trafficking, there were some arrests maybe 2-3 weeks ago. 18 or 19 young women were held. Do you have an update on that issue? There was some reporting that there was some translation problems in getting evidence from the people who were arrested.
The young ladies are getting better in health. Some of them had some health issues, so we had to move very quickly. We were providing the social services side, including, from the psychology point of view. It has been a difficult operation because of that, exactly as you say, the language barrier. So we've also had to get persons in to assist the social workers and the police investigators. So I can tell you there's an active police investigation taking place. There's a completion of statements from the girls taking place and the gathering of evidence taking place. I don't want to say more than that because it's an active investigation and I expect the leads to be pursued. But the girls are being well looked after, and I'm very thankful to the Ministry of Social Development for that. It was a Saturday night and I had to call the minister to say, look, I need some more support, more social workers to assist. The hospitals, we've been able to go in very discreetly because of course there's security risks involved. I was able to contact the Southern Division arm of the police and other arms of the police throughout Trinidad for them to provide police protection for these girls whilst they were getting medical attention. And it's been a really good operation from the logistics point of view, and seeing our public servants and the various arms, social development, the Ministry of National Security, the the human trafficking, counter-trafficking unit working together with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Children's Authority, because quite a few of these girls are minors. In fact, this morning before Cabinet, I was having a conversation with my colleague, the Minister for Gender Affairs and Children's Affairs, Minister Ayana Webster-Roy, and telling her that I'm very concerned and I want to push very quickly the development of more facilities, in particular for our young females who are caught up in these types of things, that we could provide specific safe facilities, not only for those who may be under the police protection or under the child protection unit's protection, but also convicted young women, that they need specific facilities for them on this type of thing.
Able to find any of these foreign language translators? I mean, this is the question that led to the release of the three Chinese.
No, but the translation with Chinese is very different to the translation with the Spanish. So the answer is yes. The police have been able to find translators, and as I say, there's a live police investigation going on with the use of translators. So we have been able to do that.
Find translators
In Chinese?
well,
In Spanish? No, there was no difficulty. There was no issue with obtaining translators between the young girls and none whatsoever. What Ms. Hassan Ali was referring to is with the Chinese individuals who were picked up in that operation as well. There were some difficulties in finding translators.
Getting Chinese translation. Where do we source those?
I personally would not be able to tell you that. I'm assuming at Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they would have the list of persons who are approved as translators. Failing that, I would hope we could go to the Chinese embassy and get assistance there.
The new facility at Santa Rosa, how is that? That is not what you refer to here with the girls?
No, not at all. What I identified in my many visits at the prison facilities throughout Trinidad and Tobago is, under previous administration, they had spent money. They actually built a 2-story structure. So the foundation is there, the second story is there, there's actually a roof, and it just needs to be finished off. So I've told them, let us finish that in as quick a time frame as possible for the detention of young female prisoners. On the immigration side, again, that's something I reached out to the Chief Immigration Officer about last night, and the PS to say, listen, I really want to get operationalized the use of the detention center. I can't remember the exact name of it now. That's under the prisons. Correct, detention. and get part of it for use of an expanded IDC, Immigration Detention Center. Okay, any other questions?
I was just wondering, when I said the anti-gang operations have been occurring during the carnival season, is there any link at all between that and security arrangements for carnival?
No. No.
That's for carnivals?
Yes, up to this week again, I continue to ask for presentations on it, and as I said recently, I am very pleased with the presentations. I'm very pleased with what they've put in place. The police service, we started planning for it since, if I remember correctly, November last year or October last year, and for the first time, the commissioner and the executive of the police service have ensured that for all of the big carnival parties, there is a command center there that we know in advance how the arrangements are. So if there needs to be an evacuation, if God forbid anything takes place, we have specific plans for the venue, for the party. We've been utilizing the mobile command post and center throughout at some of the bigger events. They've been meeting with the various stakeholders to say on the days of carnival, you know, these are the things we'll be looking at, these are the things if something happens, these are the ways you react, etc. This week we were saying we want, well, the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force will be assisting, and we're seeing in certain areas we want more static, a more static environment and more visibility of police. So I'm quite pleased at the preparations for a safe and secure carnival. And knock on wood, at this stage, up to this point, we haven't had any incidents at these parties and in the preparations for carnival and in the carnival events that have been taking place. Okay? Thank you all very much.